Hey kids, how's it going? This is going to be an interesting show tonight. It's also going to go long. I'm certain of it because of the way that we're structuring things. Got a couple of let's call them minor housekeeping things that we need to get out of the way, and I'm going to do my very best to execute on these housekeeping things without turning into a gibbering idiot. So bear with me. One of the decisions that I have to make before every show, and it's longtime followers of the show will know, I like to play with the t-shirts. I have different t-shirts that I choose to wear. Sometimes it's a very deliberate choice. Sometimes it's a very whimsical choice. Sometimes it's just that one doesn't smell terrible. I'll wear that one. A lot of different factors. Tonight, it's very deliberate choice. It's been a little while since I've worn this. Nope, I'm going to be okay. It's been a little while since I've worn this shirt. And it's because, as silly as it sounds, this t-shirt represents a great deal to me. There is an artist, a young man, an up-and-comer named Grandson. And if you don't read the fine print of the shirt, it looks like I don't know, being crass, but it's actually a lot more deep than that. He's got a song called Dirty, and the lyrics, I think, are so important. And they're lyrics that I take very, very seriously. They embody kind of my goals with the show more than anything that I've come across so far. I'm not going to read you the whole song. And if I play it, then YouTube will flag me all over the place. So I just want to read a couple of the lyrics before we get into the big stuff tonight. And it asks some questions, and it's the most important question that it saves for the very, very end. Do you love your neighbor? Is it in your nature? Do you love a sunset? Aren't you fed up yet? Do you have enough love in your heart to go and get your hands dirty? And that's such an important question. It's such an important question because the last part, that's a thing that so few people seem like they're willing to do. And I find that most people do have enough love in their hearts. They just don't know how to use it. I've spent the last 6 almost years fumbling my way through this show with the help of some amazing, wonderful people, trying to find the best way to get my hands dirty. Anybody who's followed the show for any length of time knows that I've talked at length about the privilege that I enjoy by nature of who I am, how I look, where I was born, all of those things. And I'm not going to do the whole speech tonight because if you're listening to this, you probably heard it on the show a few times. But that's why I chose the shirt tonight, because it's another one of those time to roll the sleeves up, even if it's a short sleeve, and I'm going to get my hands dirty. They have been, to some degree, been getting dirty for a while now. So let's talk about that. For anybody who's unfamiliar, my name is Nate Pike, and I am the host of The Breakdown, and I have been the host of this show since May 8th, 2019. In the very first episode, and in the very first minute of that episode, I made a joke about Danielle Smith being a host of a radio program. If only I had known. But this program and the show has given me some really wonderful things that I am profoundly grateful for. I've been able to talk to so many smart people, experts who approach their relative fields with compassion and sincerity. I've been able to learn from them, and it has been an absolute privilege to be able to share those conversations with you, the 5 of you. Thank you. We have made a point of walking right up to the line of journalism, but I hold the practice of journalism in far too much respect to ever call what we do or what I do journalism, because we want to be able to make jokes. We want to be able to provide honest commentary. And we've done that with a lot of different things. In the very first year of the breakdown, we talked about Canada Action and all of the gross little ties that existed between Canada Action and the UCP, and how, to many interpretations, certainly my personal one, they were a very effective AstroTurf group going into the 2019 election. We were at the front of the Aloha Gate scandals. We did deep dives on the IFR mask scandal that saw Adriana LaGrange, as the education minister, potentially use her powers of office. The ethics commissioner was never able to definitively rule on that because nobody could remember what happened. Ronald Reagan defense. But we got to do a lot of digging on that. That actually resulted in that ethics commissioner investigation. Just in the last 2 years, we have done deep dives on True North, showing the many connections between True North and Danielle Smith and the UCP and rage farming and all of the other things. We have caught Danielle Smith in so many lies. And it's been a wild ride, and I'm very, very grateful for it. We're going to go to some definitions now from Wikipedia, because they're a good source. Those Wikipedians. An oligarch, a business oligarch, is generally a business magnate who controls sufficient resources to influence national politics. A business leader can be considered an oligarch if some of the following conditions are satisfied: uses monopolistic tactics to dominate an industry, possesses sufficient political power to promote their own interests, often exacerbating income inequality and corruption, particularly through policies that benefit the elite at the expense of the majority. Controls multiple businesses which intensively coordinate their activities. And for the we love the roots of the words, folks, more generally, an oligarch, from the ancient Greek, oligos. I'm sorry, Miles, I screwed that up. And archane is a member of an oligarchy, a person who is a part of a small group holding power in a state. First definition. Second definition, which unfortunately doesn't apply in the province of Alberta. A strategic lawsuit against public participation. Strategic lawsuits against public participation, also known as SLAP suits or intimidation lawsuits, or strategic litigation against public participation, are lawsuits intended to censor, intimidate, and silence critics by burdening them with the cost of a legal defense until they abandon their criticism or opposition. One of the other stories that we've been following and providing commentary on and doing some research on during the last little while has been the skybox scandal, the Turkish Tylenol scandal, the Vanch Masks scandal, which brings us to tonight. My name is Nate Pike, and I'm the host of The Breakdown and have been since May 8th, 2019. And I need your help. And the next part is, it sounds so ridiculous. It sounds so funny, but I swear to God, it's true. I wish it wasn't, but it's true. I need your help because I'm being sued for $6 million by arguably one of the most controversial figures in Alberta politics. Here's some background. Over the last year, The Breakdown has been providing commentary and research into the ongoing scandal involving the province of Alberta's procurement of masks and medication through a company called MH Care, run by the Edmonton businessman Sam Mraiche. Sam Mraiche, as well as the ongoing media coverage of Sam Mraiche hosting UCP ministers, MLAs, and allegedly staffers attending hockey games in Sam Mraiche's skybox. So we've been trying to talk about all of those things. We've been trying to make those conversations accessible to politics in all of those things. Now, it's important to realize that the masks reportedly, and this received significant coverage, had a lot of problems. In fact, a group of physicians actually wrote letters of concern trying to raise the alarm, if you will, over the quality issues that existed with the masks. It is not hyperbolic or untrue of us to say that. The medication that we're talking about also had problems. And there's a lot of different ways. We've talked about it at length at the show, on the show. But the most recent piece in the saga of the Turkish Tylenol, as we've humorously taken to calling it, is that the way the deal was structured, taxpayers gave all of the money for the 70 to 75. Then you got to work in the storage. It all adds up upwards of $100 million deal. It had to give the money up front. And because of that, the Turkish company called Atabey Pharmaceuticals, this was confirmed by Adriana Lagrange in the legislature, is earning a great deal of interest on the money that didn't go towards buying the problematic medications. They're just sitting money on it. As for the skybox tickets, not only did Sam Mraiche appear in a photo in the skybox in Vancouver with Alberta Premier Daniel Smith and several of his business partners, but it was also later reported that the tickets were a gift to Smith by an accountant with extensive business ties to, again, Sam Mraiche. But the skybox scandal didn't stop there, as despite what appear to be deliberate efforts from the government to hide the names of the ministers, MLAs, and staffers who attended games as a guest of Sam Mraiche in an Edmonton skybox on multiple occasions, the names of several ministers have since been confirmed by journalists and the ministers themselves in press conferences. We broadcast an episode on all of this, as well as previously unreported business ties and publicly available corporate records a while back. And we were even in contact with a law firm representing Mr. Mraiche in the run-up to the show with clear communication that if we made any factual errors, we would welcome correction. We actually went so far as to request specific examples of anything that Mr. Mraiche believed was factually incorrect. We did not receive any reply addressing any factual errors, except for a statement regarding a doctored audio recording and allegations leaked by True North, suggesting that Mr. Mraiche was bankloading busloads of young students to attend the UCP AGM to secure Daniel Smith's leadership review for her. We included that denial from Mr. Mraiche in our episode and across social media. And on our social media, we also identified that recording was very clearly doctored. Because just like we said we would, we believe in and operate on good faith. Despite the fact that we have made sure that all of our commentary has been rooted in either established publicly reported facts or publicly available corporate records, both I and the show have become the target of what we believe and what I believe is a SLAPP lawsuit, which is that strategic lawsuit against public participation. I was served notice of this lawsuit on December 19th, 2024, and I have 20 days to respond. And yes, you heard that right. I am being sued for $6 million by Sam Mraiche. Now, the service of this lawsuit either deliberately or coincidentally happened right at the time that most law firms are shutting down for the holiday season. Weird that. Furthermore, the lawsuit claims that it is the sum totality of the implications of our commentary that amounts to defamation, and includes some examples that have left us more than a little bit confused. Our corkboard that we used as a graphic in the show and in the run-up to the episode, which shows all the connections between the various figures in the ongoing saga, all of those connections which we can and did prove in the episode, that's one of the things that Mr. Mraiche claims is defamatory. Because apparently being in a picture with the Premier of Alberta and assorted business partners is somehow defamatory. Because the suit is filed, the specifics of it are publicly available. And we wouldn't be surprised if they're reported on because of the high profile and ongoing controversy surrounding Mr. Mraiche and his dealings with the UCP government. But I want to be very clear on 2 points. Absolutely everything that we claimed as fact, I believe to be true. And I absolutely believe that it is in the public interest to have these conversations. The extensive reporting on this saga by literally dozens of media outlets and journalists speaks to that fact. I also want to be clear about one other thing. Despite the fact that both The Breakdown and I have an established track record of condemning Islamophobia, and in fact did so explicitly in the episode that we produced. Mr. Mraiche is claiming in the lawsuit that I and the show pursued this story precisely for Islamophobic reasons. That is patently false. Mr. Mraiche also claims that I and the show have engaged in racist rhetoric. That is also patently false. Do I have real concerns about how Mr. Mraiche conducts himself and his business? Now more than ever, you had better believe that I do. But my concerns with Mr. Mraiche start and end with Mr. Mraiche and his business associates and the government people that he affiliates with. I do not, nor have I ever held Mr. Mraiche up to be the spokesperson by word or behavior of either the Muslim or the Lebanese communities. If you are viewing the ongoing saga of Mr. Mraiche through any lens other than the publicly available facts, you are missing the point of this show and my work on it. It shouldn't need to be said that the sort of behavior that Mr. Mraiche is displaying is not representative of Muslims or the Lebanese community. And if you're someone who is using this saga to justify racist or intolerant views, you need to give your head a shake. I would also like to make it clear that the weaponization of racism or bigotry in circumstances where it is absent diminishes the very real harm that occurs when it is actually present. To be clear, I in the breakdown unequivocally condemn intolerance, bigotry, and racism in all of its forms. Period. With that addressed. Slap suits are designed to silence voices. I and the show refuse to be silenced. Too often today, the rich and the powerful use their massive resources to try and silence critical voices. I believe that we need to stand up to the rich and powerful. Again, I also believe that all of our coverage has been truthful, as accurate as possible in the public interest and fair comment, and I stand by it. Now, while the show does enjoy modest support through our Patreon page, anybody who's followed the show for any length of time knows that I work professionally as a paramedic in Calgary, and I do not have the resources on my own to fight back against what I believe is a completely unfounded and, quite frankly, spiteful lawsuit. Please help. If you believe in the importance of freedom of expression and of being able to hold the rich and powerful to the same standards that anybody else would be held to, please contribute what you can. We have set up a GoFundMe to start to mount our legal defense. You can find that GoFundMe at www.savethebreakdownab.ca. We figured we'd steal a page from the Rebels playbook, given the circumstances. Again, if you can, please help. I want to say a sincere thank you. I also want to make it clear I have no illusions that it is a great source of pride for me that there are so many people who are they do not have resources. The fact that this show is supported by the disabled community, members of the disabled community, obviously not the whole community, but there are a lot of members of the disabled community. There's a lot of folks who are on AISH who support the show. I'd much rather have, on almost any other day, the support of people who are not privileged, because that says to me that at the very least I'm doing something right. I'm getting it. And that's so important to me because, again, the silly t-shirt. So I want to make it clear to all of those folks who I know are part of that group demographic. I'm not doing well with my words right now. I apologize for that. Please just don't feel bad if you can't. Please don't feel bad. Share it, tell your friends, but please don't feel bad. Because I've had this conversation with a couple of folks who have said, you know what, I'm going to give up X, I'm going to give up Y because I want to support the breakdown. That means the absolute world to me, but I'm not desperate yet. And I want to be also really, really clear about something else. I'm not afraid because I believe in the people in this province. I believe in the people in this country. I believe that there are a lot of good people who are tired of seeing the rich and the powerful just get their way because they have more money than God and they're not afraid to throw it at people. But I want to be really, really, really clear. I'm not going anywhere. The show is not going anywhere. I and the show remain committed to keeping the conversation going for as long as we possibly can. Again, if you have the ability to help, save the breakdown, ab.ca. And on that note, with all of that said, if I did not immediately pivot to the regular Roundup, then they would have been a little successful in shutting me up. But fortunately, as anybody who knows me knows, I'm almost impossible to shut up. So let's get into our second last live show of the year, because we got a lot to talk about. So we're going to get right into it. Let's start with the screenshot. I'm going to take some names tonight. Let's start with the screenshot. The National Prayer Breakfast. On December 18th, the breakdown received a screenshot of an email sent on behalf of Dan Williams. That email was sent to Joseph Schau, Nathan Newdorf, Nathan Cooper, Chantel de Jong, or Jung, I don't know, Nolan Dick, Andrew Bochenko, two staffers, and Adriana LaGrange. Now, we got this screenshot from somebody who was like, please share this on conditions of anonymity. And of course, that is what we do here. So that is exactly what we did. And we shared it. And it was fascinating because there's a couple of different pieces to unpack with this prayer breakfast email. We're going to throw it on the screen, slightly redacted for right now. A couple of interesting pieces of it are the early bird price for these MLAs and ministers to attend the Christian National Prayer Breakfast in the United States, $590 US, regular $650. And I don't know. I'm curious. I'm not sure if that includes any potential tariffs or not. I guess we'll have to wait and see on that one. There's a couple of email that are particularly interesting, though. One of those lines is, once attendance and a confirmed so-and-so in the team will attempt to set up some KMs and a recommended meetings during the mission. A priority will be promoting Alberta energy with state representatives. Coordination amongst the delegation will be key. So let's be clear. First thing, number one, they don't have any meetings set up. They're just going to the prayer breakfast and they're hoping they're going to have some meetings set up. This is a mission, they're calling it in their email. So presumably, this is all on the taxpayers' dime. So let's be crystal clear for a second, because what we're talking about is taxpayers paying for this group of MLAs and ministers to go get their far-right conservative national prayer breakfast on, and the taxpayers are paying for it. But where things got really wild, and it's one of those, I think they call it the Streisand effects, where if you want to make a thing of things, then draw people's attention to it, like that you don't want them to look at it. We didn't even notice in the original email that there was a phone number that was, we've redacted it here because that's part of the bit that we're doing. We didn't even notice that there was a phone number that was included in the email. It didn't take very long until the DMs started to come in, because we posted this to all of our normal social media platforms. A couple hours later, we heard from a press secretary who was like, hey, I'm not going to tell you that you can't post the screenshot. Very gracious, I suppose. But I need you to redact the phone number. And honestly, I read the thing over before we register that the phone number was in there, because it's very small text, and that's not even the point of the screenshot. The point of the screenshot is taxpayers are paying for all these folks to go down and get their fundamentalist Christian on in the United States for, again, the better part of $600 or $700 US with no meetings planned. So that's the headline. But this press secretary wanted to come say, hey, you know what? This phone number, it's Dan's direct line. Please don't post the phone number. We don't want that going public. That's not supposed to be public information. And so I responded very politely and in good faith, absolutely. If you could just confirm whether or not this is a personal cell number or government issue cell number. Because if it's a personal cell number, 100%, we're not into doxing. We never want to dox anyone. If it's a government cell number, though, if this is something that the taxpayers are paying for, I'm not entirely convinced, A, 3 hours later, that we're going to be able to redact it in any meaningful way, and B, that maybe that doesn't need to be redacted. If this is his government cell phone, does that need to be redacted? I'm not sure. Help me understand, Mr. Press Secretary. Now, in the meantime, Mr. Press Secretary was also going out to anywhere else that anybody had reposted the picture. It got deleted from multiple places in Reddit for posting personal information, which got us curious, because after we asked, could you confirm whether or not it's a government cell phone or a personal cell phone? Could you just let us know which one is it? He went real quiet and he stopped answering our questions. So we Googled it. We figured, what's the harm in Googling this private cell number? Because if it truly, oh my gosh, we wouldn't get any Google results for it. We certainly wouldn't get any Google results for any expense forms that Dan Williams had published and submitted himself, not like 4 or more of them that all had that phone number in question on it. It's right there on the bottom left-hand side of the screen. So to be clear, the press secretary took the angle, I don't want this getting out there, so I'm going to say that this is personal information and try to get everybody to delete it. But this is information that Dan Williams has put up in his expense reports that anybody can view. All you have to do is go to the government expense report website, and there's all of the forms with all of this phone number all over it. So it's not a closely guarded secret. It's not a private phone number that's not available to anyone. It's there. And it's a little ironic when you stop and think about it, because Dan Williams, or at least the press secretary for one of these people, decided that they were going to get up and say, "Hey, we don't want this. We don't want this getting out there. We don't want this being out in the ether. It could be personal information." And again, we did our very, very level best to try to clarify whether it was personal information or a work phone. They decided not to answer. What are you going to do? But it's a little ironic when you stop and think about it, because very clearly, again, there's no violation of privacy that occurred here, because Dan Williams has published papers with that phone number on it. So, but it's a little ironic when you take a look at the names on the list of the prayer breakfast and you compare it to the names of all of the people who voted to out trans kids, because it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. Joseph Schau's name is on that list. Nathan Newdorf's name is on that list. Nathan Cooper, he's the Speaker of the House, so he didn't have to vote. Chantal DeJong's name is on that list. Nolan Dick's name is on that list. Andrew Boychenko's name is on that list. And Adriana Lagrange's name is on that list. So, little dissonant when you stop and think of it. But speaking of dissonant, another hard pivot, we get to talk about Monique Lagrange again. This is fun. I'm loving this story because it doesn't end. And when we did the background on this story, the little treasure trove bits that came out that were just so perfect. We get to revisit all of those now. So for anyone who's unfamiliar, Monique LaGrange is the Red Deer School Board trustee who posted this meme. I'm not sure if we call it meme, maybe a little bit more hate speechy. I'm not sure. It's a picture of a bunch of kids leaning out of a window waving Nazi flags, and then a bunch of kids in a classroom being inclusive, waving a variety of pride flags. And Monique LaGrange's comment on this was, brainwashing is brainwashing. Now, the initial posting that means sparked a first code of conduct complaint, that got sanctions. So the school board said to her, "Oh, that's not good. You can't do that. That makes everybody look very bad on the school board. You can't do that." She then breached those sanctions and said she absolutely wasn't going to apologize. She was still going to speak in public, and got a second complaint. That's when the board of trustees opted to disqualify LaGrange. She said, "No, we're not going to do that." And the government of Alberta confirmed in 2023 that she's also a distant relative of Adriana LaGrange, who was also a Red Deer Catholic Regional School Board trustee. So all of these breaches of sanctions that Monique LaGrange did ended up getting her disqualified. And that included doing multiple media interviews, which the original sanctions said you're not allowed to do those anymore, but nobody stops Monique. And so she filed a number of appeals. And in November, LaGrange's legal counsel, James Kitchen, indicated that his client intended to take her case to the Court of Appeal of Alberta. That happened in two parts. First part, that was said, yeah, no, it's totally justified what the board did. You did some very bad things, Monique. The second part was just this week, and the judge upheld that too. But all of this gives me the perfect excuse to go back to Monique's Instagram account, which was Wisdom's Closet. And I will never get tired of these pictures because nothing says the Jesus and the obsessed with the Jesus like merch. That's literally what her business was for a chunk of time. This is no longer a thing, but it was a whole product line that was obsessed with Jesus. She had T-shirts that were obsessed with Jesus. And where it gets particularly, I'm sure there's some Christians out there that will find some humor in this. Today is the day that we team up and partner with Jesus to use his word to change atmospheres throughout the world. I am designing custom T-shirts and apparel with words from Jesus Christ on them. They're Holy Spirit inspired, prayed over, and a revelation from God. The T-shirts, the aprons, the revelations from God. Now, I mean, given what I opened this show with, I think it should be pretty clear. I'm a fan of a good T-shirt. I do not, however, believe that any of my apparel, whether it's custom or just bought, is a revelation from any deity. I really do like Grandson's lyrics, though. Moving on from there. Last week, we talked about the Edmonton Police Commission, and this is a wild story. Because the former chair of the Edmonton Police Commission announced that he was planning on finishing his term as chair, but then he was going to remain on the commission for the remaining 2 years of his term while he lived in Portugal. So again, Edmonton Police Commission, Portugal. In the statement that he released immediately after the announcement, which sparked off all of the things, Mr. McDougall said, "I'm pleased to announce that I'm retiring to Portugal after a 35-year career serving our country as a member of the Canadian Armed Forces. While my time as chair of the Edmonton Police Commission ends on December 31st, 2024, I plan to continue serving Edmonton for the remainder of my term as a commissioner. As an appointee of the government of Alberta, I sought approval from the minister's office, and they supported me in this action," which gives me the perfect excuse to play this video again, because it came up at a press conference that Mike Ellis was there at.
The current chair of the Edmonton Police Commission is retiring to Portugal. Oh. John McDougall's term expires December 31st, 2026. Is it okay that he will continue to serve on the commission while living overseas?
I think I vaguely had heard that he was moving overseas. I know his partner had moved overseas. I was not aware that he would be performing his duties while overseas, so it's the first time hearing of this. My information that's been provided to me, I'm happy to get some corrections if that is not the case, but my understanding is that he will be in Edmonton while performing the duties and that only when he is done and retired.
So that was that press conference was on December, I think it was the 13th. Mr. McDougall released a new statement this week. After much reflection over the past few days, I've decided to resign my position as a member of the Edmonton Police Commission effective immediately. It is clear that my residency would be an unwelcome distraction from the important work of the Commission, which is not fair to the citizens who rely on us to provide governance and oversight from the Edmonton Police Service. So, I mean, it's funny, but it's also really important. And the argument that we made last week was that it's really important because Mr. Ellis was very, very clear. He'd not heard that Mr. McDougall had been given permission to stay in Portugal while serving on the Edmonton Police Commission, which means that it was an unelected staffer who presumably he had that conversation with, because if it wasn't Mike Ellis, there's literally nobody else in his department who is not technically a staffer. So there's that. But he's resigned effective immediately. So December 17th. Moving on from there. There is a by-election. There's so much. I still have like this many pages left to talk about. There's a by-election in Lethbridge-West. NDP candidate Rob Miyashiro was the victor. And it's interesting to take a look at some of the numbers. Now, we talked a little bit about this last week. We said by-elections normally not the huge turnouts, and the official results don't come out for a bit, but Elections Alberta has released the unofficial results. There were a total of 13,561 valid votes cast. Now, where this gets to be particularly interesting is if we go to the Wikipedia. We're leaning heavily on Wikipedia today. If we go to the Wikipedia page, you can see that there were 37,096 eligible voters, which means the voter turnout for this competition was 36.6%, which is not great. But again, by-election, not bad. By way of contrast, in 2024, the voter turnout was 61.8%. Now, where it's going to be interesting to see whether or not these numbers translate into the next provincial election is in 2024, there were four parties that ran. There was the NDP, the UCP, the Alberta Party, and the Liberals. The Liberals did not field a candidate in this election. And so if you take a look at just who picked up what, it's interesting because the vote share for the NDP slightly decreased. They went from 53.92% to 53.38%. Now, it's a very, very small decrease, but it's not nothing, because the interesting part is the UCP went from 42% to 44%. So one would think if there were going to be Liberal supporters, that they would naturally gravitate towards the NDP. Either the smaller, and to be clear, there were only 375 Liberal voters in 2023's election, not 2024. My bad. You would think that they might have gravitated towards the NDP and shown up. They did not. So it's interesting because it's just interesting. Moving on from there, this one's a fun one. I love this story. Because science. So the paper, a French study that popularized the idea at the beginning of the pandemic that COVID-19 patients could be treated with hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin, has been retracted. Now, this is huge, and there's a lot of nuance to this story that we're going to try to spend a little bit of time on, because first of all, the story was, the study was bad. There were 26, the entire sample group was 26 COVID-19 patients treated with hydroxychloroquine, and azithromycin. 6 patients dropped out of the non-randomized study. 1 died. 1 developed nausea. 3 were transferred to intensive care, and 1 left. And of those who remained, they were tested for COVID-19 under a much more relaxed definition than used by most health authorities at the time. Now, from there, in August of 2023, a letter was published in Therapies. A series of physicians, experts noted that the cutoff for classifying a polymerase chain reaction test as positive was different in the treatment and control groups. So they were treating the treatment groups different than they were the control groups from that whopping sample size of 26. The letter also raised questions about whether the study had received proper ethical approval and noted an editorial conflict of interest. That letter at the time, back in 2023, called for the paper to be retracted. The retraction notice states Elsevier and the International Society of Antimicrobial Chemotherapy, which co-own the journal, decided to retract the paper because of ethical issues. And this is a quote, as well as concerns raised by 3 of the authors themselves. So the call's coming from inside the house regarding the article's methodology and conclusion. And in case you're wondering, yes, this is the study we're talking about, the famous Smith tweet, where Danielle Smith, when she was still a radio host of 770, tweeted out, new controlled clinical study conducted by doctors in France shows that hydroxychloroquine, so she missed the azithromycin part, still doesn't work, but doesn't matter, shows that hydroxychloroquine cures 100% of coronavirus patients within 6 days of treatment. Hashtag chloroquine. It did not. And in fact, Smith deleted the tweet. She had to. Global News took immediate action from the story on the screen. Global News took immediate action when the tweet from our talk radio personality came to our attention. We do not support posting information that does not come from credible sources and remain steadfast in our commitment to being a responsible, trustworthy source for all Canadians. So there's an Alberta connection. Moving on from there. Again, such a busy week. We got to talk about the surgical suites situation in Edmonton, because there was some absolutely shocking news that came out of Edmonton in regards to orthopedic surgeries. A proposal sent in August to Alberta Health Services and Alberta Health would have allowed inpatient surgeries to resume at only a cost of $240,000 per year. That's like, just doing some math off the top of my head, that's like 24 hospitalists that you could get for the cost of just one breakdown lawsuit, according to documents obtained by CBC News. If you don't laugh, you cry. But that idea was so the $240,000, we can get the surgeries, we can get them back up and running, we can do all of the surgeries, we can do the numbers. That idea was rejected by AHS leadership based on preference for cost-neutral solutions, according to a document prepared for Alberta Health by the working group of physicians who developed the proposal. The solution proposed to AHS and Alberta Health in August would have added additional hospitalist coverage, allowing it to resume inpatient surgeries. Now, what's wild is in the letter that this group of physicians who were trying to say, hey, if we can get $240,000 together, if we can maybe not go to a prayer breakfast or something, they didn't say that. It would have impacted over 1,000 patients. Now, according to the article, 101 patients had their surgery dates canceled in the first 3 weeks of July, which was when this shutdown of sorts occurred. Of those, 80% have now had their procedures completed. The working group's estimate of more than 1,000 patients affected included surgeries that were not scheduled, but would have been performed if the shutdown had not occurred. So, while the province is looking at paying people to build private, for-profit, publicly funded charter facilities for $240,000. According to this, they could have knocked off 1,000 orthopedic surgeries in 6 months. they decided not to do that because they were looking for a cost-neutral solution. Again, I want to say that a second time, just to be super clear. The government of Alberta, Danielle Smith, has been very, very clear. She believes that chartered surgical facilities, which are privately owned for profit, but funded by taxpayers, we like to call it profitization here at the Breakdown, those are the solution. But $240,000, that's it towards the public healthcare system. Could have gotten 1,000 surgeries done. Moving on from there. And this is gonna make some people angry. Please don't sue me. Naheed Nenshi. We got to talk about the comms for a second, because there was a bit of an own goal that happened over the last week. And unfortunately, that own goal also included a little bit of misinformation, inaccurate information. I don't think it was deliberate. I don't think the initial mistake, I'm going to say, was deliberate. But it doesn't change the fact that in this tweet from December 16th of 2024, and in the video that we're about to play, Naheed Nenshi said some things that were just not true.
What's not helpful is UCP MLAs literally doing a happy dance on the floor of the legislature because they were so excited President Trump won. What's not helpful is the Premier of Alberta calling President Trump hilarious on Fox News. And what's not helpful is the Premier of Alberta completely taking the frame of the U.S. government on this. There were 44 pounds of fentanyl caught at the Alberta-Montana border. That sounds like a lot. It's not a lot compared to the hundreds of thousands of pounds that came from the Mexican border. And for the Premier to say, yeah, this is a very big problem, President Trump, you're right, and we're going to put drones and helicopters, and we're going to step into, this is what she announced today, and we're going to step into the federal government's jurisdiction on Border Patrol, because I've seen that show Border Patrol on US TV, and I want that. It's basically what she said today. And if you're in a tough negotiation and you want to be able to be a serious negotiator, you don't walk into the negotiation by telling your adversary you're right and we're going to do everything you want. I'm very concerned that the Premier's casual attitude on this, her lack of seriousness as a Premier, her lack of seriousness.
Now, that's the video that was posted. And I got to be clear about a couple things here. First of all, I got to correct myself. There was really only one major thing that I believe that, and I can prove, that Naheed Nenshi said that was wrong in there. And that was the 44 pounds caught at the Alberta Montana border. That's not true. We're going to talk about that in a sec. But what got unfortunate about it was Danielle Smith then immediately had her little comms, jump on it. And Danielle Smith, instead of saying, wow, Naheed Nenshi doesn't even know what's going on in the border, and he's going to try to lecture me about what's going on at the border. Mr. Nenshi may be worrying more about getting elected first. She could have said something like that. It would have been very on brand for her, but she didn't correct it. Instead, she decided to give more misinformation using the DEA as a source, the Drug Enforcement Agency, which is not a Canadian agency. It's an American agency known for a little bit of hyperbole, maybe, when it comes to how drugs work and doses and things and stuff. We're going to get into that in a sec. But first, the Smith tweet. 2 milligrams of fentanyl can kill a human being. The 44 pounds of fentanyl at the Alberta-Montana border represents nearly 100 million lethal doses. Alberta will do the right thing, and then goes on to a near border patrol show. The DA statistic is false. Saying 2 milligrams of fentanyl can kill a human being is kind of like saying 1,000 pounds of fentanyl could kill a human being. 100 tons of fentanyl could kill a human being. Both technically true, but not at all accurate. It's actually entirely dependent on a variety of factors, including the weight and size of the person who's exposed to the fentanyl, deliberately or not, whether or not they have any sort of built-up resistance, and perhaps most importantly, when we're having the conversation about what's going on with drugs in Alberta, what else is in it, because there's a lot of other things that can cause really, really complex reactions to fentanyl. And yes, I want to be very clear. I'm not minimizing the tragedy that the opioid overdose situation or the opioid crisis situation has inflicted. I'm not minimizing that. We've done many episodes on the opioid crisis in Alberta, in Canada, in North America. But if we're going to have real conversations about how to address the problem, it needs to be addressed in actual facts. So when we're talking about those 44 pounds or approximately 20 kilograms, those seized, at the entire Canada-US border from October 2023 to September 2024. That's the whole border over pretty much a whole year. A small share of what was seized at the border crossing between Canada and Montana was about 3 pounds or 1.4 kilograms of fentanyl in the fiscal year 2024. And that comes from the Canada border, their own statistics. So, and again, I'm not saying 1.4 kilograms of fentanyl, oh, that's fine, let them have it. But that's a cumulative total of a bunch of people largely bringing up personal, air quotes, amounts. If we were really interested in having a conversation about how to address the fentanyl crisis, and particularly how to address the supply of fentanyl, as well as other toxic things that are mixed into the fentanyl, we would probably do better, rather than turning an eye to the border when it's convenient because Donald Trump is having a temper tantrum, we would do a much better eye turning to within. CBC did an excellent job of explaining the whole situation in August of this year. Organized crime groups have shifted their efforts away from importing the deadly synthetic opioid fentanyl and are now producing it primarily on Canadian soil. A briefing note prepared for the Deputy Minister of Health Canada, obtained by CBC News through an access to information request, lays out the changes law enforcement agencies have observed in the illegal market for the drug. Superlab interdictions across BC, Ontario, and anybody want to guess what the next province is? Oh, you probably already did. It's Alberta. Suggest that the domestic supply is more than sufficient to supply the domestic market, the note says. And none of this addresses the fundamental problem, which is the question, why do people use? And we've had experts on the show to answer that question. The answer is available for anybody who wants to hear it. And it's not just, to be clear, I'm not saying, oh, our show has all the answers. The experts have been standing from the mountaintops shouting as loudly as they can. This is what the problem is. We need to deal with this because this is why people use, and it's trauma. People use because they're trying to dull the pain of whatever it is that has happened to them. I know it's the end of the year, but this is what I'm going to say. You should go back and listen to some of the episodes that we did with just Guy Felicella, because he talks extraordinarily powerfully about the underlying issues that cause people to use. And if we really wanted to address the fentanyl crisis, if we really wanted to address the opioid crisis, we would not be leading the conversation with whatever Donald Trump's Truth Socials treats. I don't know what they're called. I'm not on that platform. Out. If people have trauma, they will do whatever they can to decrease that pain, even if it just means spinning around in circles. But if we're trying to solve those problems, we should not be spinning around in circles. Moving on from there to some actual good-ish news, kind of. The physician compensation model that was announced almost a year ago, maybe a little bit more than a year ago. Dr. Paul Parks, when he was president of the AMA, did a press conference with Adriana LaGrange where they talked about, and Daniel Smith, where they talked about the new physician compensation model. They were rolling it out. It was going to be good, so fast. They were going to move it. And then they didn't. They didn't. Now, I want to be clear. The new model appears to be, on its face, a good thing. And the AMA has said, this is a good thing. Dr. Paul Parks has even said in multiple interviews, this is a good thing. And on its face, there's a bunch of different things that sound really good if they can pull it off. They want to maintain high panel numbers. So a panel is the number of patients that a physician sees, a minimum of 500 patients. They want to incentivize panel growth and improve access to primary care. They want to provide after-hours care. So if you want access to this new model, these are the things that you as a physician will have to do. Improving technology to encourage tools that help streamline work and enhance patient care. Enhance team-based care, which will encourage developing integrated teams that may include family physicians, nurse practitioners, registered nurses, dietitians, and pharmacists to provide patients with the best care possible. Adding efficiencies in clinical operations to simplify processes for both patients and healthcare providers. All of these things sound really, really good. But there's a but to it, because you can do a good thing. You can do a very good thing. And this is, by all accounts, albeit a year late, a very good thing. But it's also not rolling out till April, when the new budget cycle begins. And it's only rolling out if they get 500 physicians to sign up for it. So it's a little unclear. It's not a guarantee. It's not 100%. Now, Smith claims that the model is going to bring doctors to Alberta, which in and of it sounds great. But it's important to remember that money isn't the only thing that makes doctors decide where to practice. And Alberta is a province that has kind of inserted the government into the examining rooms of physicians on a couple of different issues. And the easiest one to talk about, obviously, is gender-affirming care. Despite the medical evidence, despite the objections of all of the experts who have any credibility, the government of Alberta has created laws that say, no, this is how we're going to do things. This is how we want to run the show. We're going to 100% adamantly say, this is what's going to happen. And it's not great. It's not good. It's also a pattern that we're seeing repeat itself over and over and over again with the UCP, where they're doing everything that they can to centralize power. And we saw this in another instance this week. They did a big dump right before the holiday season. It's almost as if people do things right before the holiday season because they don't want people to pay attention to what they're doing. Anyways. Jason Nixon announced that the province is centralizing control over how the funding for homeless responses are done across the province. And this is a little bit complex. So I'm going to ask you to bear with me as we kind of walk through this. Currently, funding for the response to homelessness and houselessness in the province of Alberta is done, well, it was up until the 20th. It was done by using community-based organizations or CBOs. Those CBOs would then provide funding to groups who applied for that funding. So there were 7 of them in all of the major municipalities across the province of Alberta. And the government would say to these organizations, we're going to give you the money. You know your communities. You know who needs what. You know what the organizations are that are trying to do the different things. You know all of this stuff. So we're going to give you the money, and then you make sure that it gets to the places and the people that need it. That's your job. Now, the province is changing their strategy and their argument. And the part of the argument that they're using is they're saying that since homelessness is a province-wide issue now, Mr. Nixon's like, oh, yeah, no, I live in a small town. If I was to say that my town's a city, oh, boy, people would just lose their minds. They'd come and shoot all my horses. They would. Those areas are starting to experience more visible homelessness and houselessness. Let's be clear. To suggest that homelessness and houselessness have never occurred in rural Alberta is not true. But that's the argument, because it's a province-wide issue now. They want to cut out the middleman to ensure everyone gets fair access to grants, except Mr. Nixon kind of showed his hand a little bit at the presser.
You said that there were some organizations that did not fit the provincial mandate. Do you have any specific examples?
We've seen stuff over the years where For example, CBO money going to Alberta Health Services, which is not the mandate of my department to send money to another government department to try to do some sort of outreach service that we're not really sure how it connects to the overall homeless structure. That'd be one example. We've seen evidence in the past of organizations distributing tents out into the community. I think we've dealt with that over the last year or so, but that would be a great example of where our government is focused on shelter and housing, not on providing encampments. We want people in warm, safe shelters. I will point to the fire that had to be responded to in Calgary today in a very dangerous encampment situation as to why. And another example of, money flowing to pet food banks, of which I have pets. I think it's very important that we care for animals. But at the end of the day, that'd be a priority more on the SPCA side, not on me who's trying to tackle.
Now it's the entitlement that really shines through there. And it's also the fact that Mr. Nixon, whose family has operated a shelter in Calgary for quite a while, the fact that he can't seem to wrap his head around when we're talking about homelessness, when we're talking about houselessness, we're talking about a multifaceted, complex issue more often than not. He says he doesn't want to have any overlap between AHS because, it's just a housing issue. I just want to deal with the housing. I want to get the people into the shelters. People who are homeless have health issues. People who are homeless have difficulties accessing health care. I'm not going to say none of them have a family physician, but I will say I'd be very surprised if the majority of them do. I'd be very surprised if the majority of them have anywhere to get health care. So overlapping health care with houseless and homeless outreach actually makes a lot of sense. Keeps people from going into emergency rooms. Keeps people from having health conditions that turn into much worse, more expensive health conditions. He says he doesn't want, but where it really shows is, some places are handing out tents. They're handing out that can't have people. That's an SPC. If Mr. Nixon ever spent any time speaking with anybody who has a pet and is homeless or houseless, one of the first things that he would hear is one of the reasons why they choose to sleep rough is because they can't bear the thought of losing their only friend, their companion, their pet. And this, again, is where mental health so directly overlaps with homelessness and houselessness. And this also highlights, tragically, how much the destruction of an integrated healthcare system is already putting blinders on people, like the minister. But where it gets to be really, really clear is Mr. Nixon does not want organizations that are doing things, reckless things, like giving people tents and pet food. He doesn't want them getting any government funding. So this is about the centralization of power. This is about flexing on control. That's all it is. If you don't do exactly things the way that the government wants you to do, if you dare to exercise some compassion in a way that doesn't align perfectly with the UCP's, I'm going to go ahead and say it, more than a little restrictive model of compassion, you don't get any money. You don't get to help people. Speaking of money, though, I love the caption for this graphic. And, it's another one of those ones where if we weren't going to get flagged on all of the platforms for using some music, the caption is to this graphic. None of you can see it, but it's quite clever. You down with APP? Because it turns out the chief actuary is very much not down with the Alberta Pension Plan. The estimate by the province appears to have been cut by half. So the UCP, absolutely, they were not going to campaign on a pension. No, sir. They were just going to govern on one. They got the results back, kind of, because they said to the federal government, okay, well, before we have a referendum, we need to know how much money you're going to give us. We need to know your total so that we can say that you're big meanies. And the chief actuary's position paper posted online on Friday comes to a similar conclusion as University of Calgary economics professor Trevor Toome. Last year, Trevor Toome calculated that Alberta would be entitled to between 20 and 25% of the $575 billion plan. The quote from Toome in the story here, it is a clear rejection of the government's 53% claim that has been quite prominently touted now for quite some time. Trevor Toome, who is never argue with Trevor Toome. He's a super fantastic economist and very funny. Dry, but very funny. He put up a Twitter thread. We're going to share just a couple of tweets from that Twitter thread because they really do highlight a couple of important things. That formula does not imply a future APP would be entitled to 53% of the CPP. Instead, it implies the number that I put out in my original analysis. Trevor Toome's always right. That is 20 to 25%. The dollar amount would depend on the year of withdrawal. Since, of course, the size of the CPP investment fund changes over time. But now, intuitively, we should have in mind not $334 billion, which is what Danielle Smith and her panel have been shopping to Albertans, but something like $120 to $150 billion. And he's got a graph. I love this graph so much because you can see the top line is there's LifeWorks. That's how good LifeWorks is feeling about it. And then you can see Dr. Toome's approach. And then you can see the public accounts of Canada approach, and it's nowhere near what Danielle Smith was promising that she was going to be able to get Albertans. The chief actuary, Azia Billig, disagreed with the LifeWorks interpretation. Her position paper says the federal law governing the CPP must be interpreted as if all provinces could withdraw from the plan at the same time and take their share. The quote from the story of the chunk that I just read, a calculation method that results in negative parts or in a hypothetical allocation to all provinces that is higher than the total net investment income does not respect the textual indications of the legislation. So chalk that one up to another overpromise and underdeliver. Definitely not promise made, promise kept. And that brings us to our last story episode chunk segment. I don't know what to call it. That brings us to our last bit. And we're going to talk about Grassy Mountain. We got to talk about Grassy Mountain. We got to talk about coal mines, and I got to close that window or start to turn into an idiot. And it might already be an idiot. Who knows? Let's talk about the history of Grassy Mountain for a little bit, because there was an announcement made. There was a press conference. We're going to play some clips, but it's important to think about the history of it. So going back in time, there was a period where there was an argument that was being made for or against Grassy Mountain. In the process of that argument, one of the things that was decided to be done was to have both the province and the federal government. So the province and the federal government work together to say, hey, let's take a look at this Grassy Mountain thing. How's it going to work out? And it did not work out great. For Benga, which was the previous iteration of Northback, who's currently trying to get the mine up and running again. We find in some instances from the report, Benga made overly optimistic assumptions of the effectiveness of its proposed mitigation measures. This does not represent the conservative approach appropriate for the sensitive environmental setting of the project. A brief summary of our findings on matters related to federal jurisdiction. We find that the project would likely result in significant adverse environmental effects on surface water quality, west slope cutthroat trout, got it that time, and their habitat, and whitebark pine. For some Indigenous groups, the project would result in adverse effects on the current use of land for traditional purposes and physical and cultural heritage, but the effects would not be significant. But that's just the first little chunk. There was other parts of the report that were pretty damning. Based on our assessment, we conclude that the project is likely to result in significant adverse environmental effects on surface water quality. Again, the west slope cutthroat trout and their habitat, whitebark pine, rough fescue grasslands and vegetation species and community biodiversity. Although we identify other adverse residual effects, we determined they were not likely to be significant. We also found that the project is likely to contribute to existing significant adverse cumulative environmental effects on West Slope cutthroat trout, little brown bats, grizzly bears, and white park pine. Due to the limitations of Benga's approach to assessing cumulative effects, we are unable to assess the magnitude of some cumulative effects. We find that the project would result in low to moderate positive economic impacts on the regional economy, but that Benga did not consider some risks that could reduce the magnitude of these positive impacts. Just a couple more, and then we're done. I promise. One more. The approval decision. Exercising our authority as the AER, we deny Benga's applications, some numbers, under the Coal Conservation Act. As we are not approving the project under the Coal Conservation Act, there is no need to approve Benga's related applications under the Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act, the Water Act, the Public Lands Act, and therefore we also deny those applications. So let's be really clear. The federal government, the provincial government, they took a look at the Grassy Mountain Mine, and they said, well, that's a bad idea. We should not do that. We do not approve it. In fact, in June 21st, 2021, in response to a request for comment, a spokesperson for then Energy Minister Sonia Savage referenced a statement made in June and attributed to Savage and Alberta Environment Minister Jason Nixon, the guy with the homelessness. As outlined in the statement, Alberta's government respects the recommendation of the Joint Review Panel. June 21st, 2021, Alberta government, UCP Alberta government said, we're not gonna go ahead with it. We're not gonna do it. But of course, fast forward just a little bit. Brian Jean comes in hot as the new energy minister and says Grassy Mountain has had a project summary and an environmental impact assessment filed with the AR for several years before the 2022 ministerial order. And thus, it qualifies as an advanced coal project. He also sent a letter to the Alberta Energy Regulator, president and CEO, where he said the purpose of this letter is to provide my interpretation, unsolicited, regarding appropriate application of the definition of advanced coal project under that order. It is my understanding that 4 projects meet the definition of advanced coal project under clauses 3 and 6 of the ministerial order. Vista Coal Mine, Phase 2, Grassy Mountain, Tent Mountain, and also Mine 14. Each of these 4 coal projects had submitted a project summary to the AER for the purposes of determining whether an environmental impact assessment is required at the time the ministerial order was signed. The ministerial order does not require an active regulatory application tied to the project description to qualify a project as an advanced coal project. So let's be super duper clear. Brian Jean, before we go Brian Jean, the provincial government, the federal government, all said, it's a bad plan. Sonia Savage, energy minister, under the UCP, said, they said it was a bad plan. We're going to listen to him. Brian Jean comes in and says, no. I think it's a great plan. Such a good plan. I love this plan so much. I'm going to write a letter as the minister to the president and CEO of the Alberta Energy Regulator. I'm going to reach out because they're apparently within my reach. And I'm going to tell them that, in my opinion, this is what they should do. Now, this is very on brand, and it's important to keep that in mind, given the amount of influence that the UCP government has exerted on organizations like the AER and others, because we saw it with the whole renewables. It's a real nice job there. If you want to keep it, you got to do what the minister says. Not saying, just saying. Paraphrasing, but that's literally paraphrased. That's the essence, as I try to avoid another lawsuit. That's the essence of what the government said to the arm's distance, arm's length, arm's reach, probably the best term, organizations that were supposed to be protecting Albertans from political interference. Well, as it turns out, Brian's got some thoughts that he wants to share. And so we saw on the 20th as well, Brian Jean Rebecca Schultz stood up and they said, hey, everybody, we've got this great plan for coal. We're going to say there's no, and the next word does all the heavy lifting here, no new mountaintop, any future mines. Strict environmental rules. There won't be mountaintop removal. We won't let that happen ever again. We're going to tell the public. I'm going to put up a graphic on my socials, not done by AI and Canva, probably Canva. No mountaintop removal mining. If you just look at this, boy, it sure looks like Brian's saying Grassy Mountain, no, hard no. But if you listen to Brian...
How will this affect the Grassy Mine proposal?
Well, the Grassy mine proposal, of course, was an exempt mine going forward, but there are absolutely no exceptions in relation to selenium and the effect and the long ongoing scenario of selenium. And the AER is, of course, an arm's length independent regulator, and we're going to make sure that they will be dealing with all of the new mine applications as well as the existing one.
The AER's arm length. It is the AER where they're gonna make sure that nobody messes with the things and the stuff the AER is. But we're gonna let them. They get to do Grassy Mountain. That's cool. We're gonna let them do Grassy Mountain. And this is where she's an energy reporter now, which makes me sad because when she was doing politics, so good. I have nothing but good things to say about this reporter because she takes no bullshit. Man, Australia, the things from the irony, so good. It's an Australian billionaire who wants to do this coal mine. It's an Australian, now Canadian, who asked this question. And the video is not loading. That's perfect. I'm going to see if we can get the video to play.
That you will not allow open pit coal. You keep saying that you will not allow open pit coal mining, but that's quite disingenuous given the fact that this will not apply to, for example, Grassy Mountain or any other exempt project, which will be open pit coal mining. And I know you're saying no new open pit, but when you're saying no open pit mining, and this doesn't apply to Grassy Mountain, how do you expect Albertans to actually look at this and say, yeah, no, that's a fair go, let's go for it?
Well, Emma, I appreciate the question. I hope they look at us and say, wow, that's smart. What a smart government, because they're actually looking at something that wasn't reclaimed properly. They're going to require the company to reclaim it properly, and at the same time, they're going to be able to do it economically and not cause any environmental problems. I think it's a great solution, and we have to look around the province for other opportunities. There's a lot of brownfields, a lot of contamination, and a lot of contaminated sites left by previous governments, including the federal government, and we need to find innovative ways to clean those up. And we're going to. Grassy Mountain is no exception to that. We're going to be very, very closely monitoring this and dealing with the AER to make sure that this is done in the most responsible way possible without affecting the people's lives and the environment in a negative way.
I mean, you kind of spun that answer there, Minister, with all due respect. I did say that, this does not apply to open pit mining when it comes to Grassy Mountain. So it's disingenuous for you to say there will not be open pit mining when, in fact, there could well be, given what happens with Grassy Mountain. But on the royalty part of this, you talked about a substantial increase. Are we talking there about what Albertans might get from oil and gas, for example, or how high are you kind of picturing that might go?
Well, first of all, Emma, I said no new open pit mines. So I'm not disingenuous. There's certain contractual relationships we have to continue to honor, but we're going to honor those at the same time, make sure we keep the environment clean and people's lives safe. Our number one priority is going to be water and people and wildlife, and we're
so much in that clip. And yes, it is disingenuous. It is disingenuous to say, hey, we're going to put out a graphic that says no mountaintop removal mining, except for those ones that I reached in to the process. And I told the AER that, in my opinion, they were good to go. if we just pretend that I never did that, then it's not disingenuous at all. If we pretend that the word new appears nowhere in that graphic that Mr. Gene put out there, I'm going to read it again. We will not allow mountaintop removal mining. Any future coal mines will be under the strictest guidelines in the world that prioritize the protection of our water and our environment. No mountaintop removal mining. That's what Grassy Mountain is. So, yeah, it is more than a little bit disingenuous, Brian. And he makes it pretty clear what the reasons are that he wants to pursue all of this.
But on the royalty part of this, you talked about a substantial increase. Are we talking there about what Albertans might get from oil and gas, for example, or how high are you kind of picturing that might go?
Well, first of all, I said no new open pit mines. So I'm not disingenuous. There's certain contractual relationships we have to continue to honor, but we're going to honor those at the same time, make sure we keep the environment clean and people's lives safe. Our number one priority is going to be water and people and wildlife, and we're going to make sure that those things are protected no matter what the case is. As far as royalties go, you know, as a person that's been in business for a long time, very seldom do I have people come to me and say, listen, you're charging us too little. Well, I've had at least 3 coal miners tell me over the last number of years that the rates in Alberta are just too low. Well, they're too low. We're going to bring them up. I don't know what that number is going to be yet because we have to consult with industry and we have to make sure we're competitive across the world. But right now we are not competitive and we have to bring that rate up so that Albertans recognize that if we're going to allow this to happen, that they get a true benefit from this, a benefit that
Now, there's a lot, again, to unpack there. And it did kind of overlap from the initial clip, but there's a reason for that. And that's because Brian made the comment in there, hey, you know what? We've got these contractual obligations. Now, what exactly would those contractual obligations be? Because to the best of what we are able to find on the interwebs, there are no contractual obligations that exist in regards to the Alberta government making sure the Grassy Mountain goes ahead as a coal mine again. And if there are contractual obligations, the Alberta government to making sure the Grassy Mountain coal mine goes ahead, kind of create a huge conflict of interest when doing any kind of environmental assessment. If you say, hey, no, we got to give you the mine because we have this contract thing and it's super important for us to honor that. If that's the argument that you're going to make, then it's pretty wild that you would then turn around and say, no, but we're going to have all of these strict environmental measures. And in fact, Rebecca Schultz herself summed it up really quite well when she was asked about, okay, so let's talk about the selenium. Let's talk about the risks that selenium presents to the water supply, to agriculture, to the food supply, to pretty much all of southern Alberta.
So will you guarantee that there won't be a selenium problem if Grassy Mountain goes ahead?
Here's what I would say. Our job in the Department of Environment is to set the environmental standards. The AER is then the arm's length regulator who ensures that any and all companies, no matter where they are in the province of Alberta, but especially so in southern Alberta, where water and these types of concerns have been raised, that they are adhering to those high standards. If they are not, obviously the AER as the regulator has a number of levers to ensure that they are either brought into compliance or.
So, Rebecca Schultz, can you guarantee there will be no selenium spills? Rebecca Schultz, well, I don't want to answer that question. So instead, what I'm going to say is, despite the fact that the whole reason why we're in this situation is because the government decided to mess with the AER and say, oh no, these are exempt projects. Despite that fact, we're going to rely on the AER being an arm's length organization. It'll be super duper fine. And that's what our plan is going to be. Plus, you know, if anybody does spill selenium, oh boy, the AER will tell them not to do it again. One doesn't have to look very far, much farther than northern Alberta, to see any shortage of examples of well, we thought we had the rules in place. We thought we had the environmental protections in place. And then it turns out, no, the water supply did get affected. Wildlife did get affected. And when we're talking about coal mines in the mountains, where so much of the water for southern Alberta comes from, this is a huge, big issue. And to present it as, well, I can't guarantee, she didn't guarantee it. The fact that she was standing in front of the microphone, she's trying to pitch this idea to Albertans, and she couldn't even guarantee that there weren't going to be any spills, means that she's not comfortable saying, she's not comfortable staking her professional life as a politician, her reputation, all of those things. She's not comfortable staking all of that on, well, yeah, it's never, I'm going to make sure it never happens. The fact that she's not willing to say that is extraordinarily telling. And the fact that she responds by trying to say, well, we've got the AAR, this arm's length organization. They'll punish people. Once that toothpaste is out of the tube, the water table's screwed. That's the bottom line. And there doesn't seem to be any regard for that. So you better believe that we will be filing some FOIPs, because if there are contractual obligations that Brian Jean feels obligated to put ahead of the environmental safety for the water supply of the southern half of the province, boy, howdy, you better believe that we want to know what those are. And I think that's the last thing on my list. Couple things that I want to get out of the way, because I just want to get them out of the way. I want to apologize to our patrons, our Patreon supporters, the folks who support us at www.patreon.com/thebreakdownab. We had we had a really great plan. We were going to do like a little online Christmas party, and then $6 million lawsuit has taken up most of my time for the last few days. So sorry, we're not going to be able to do our online Christmas party, just because I got lawyers to find and things to do. But doom and gloom. We do have one last live episode that we're going to do next week. We have a very special guest host that I'm hoping to be able to bring in, assuming that I'm not too radioactive after this show. And we're going to have some fun. We're going to run it, hopefully, essentially as an open mic, where people can share their thoughts about the year in politics. And this is what I'm excited about. Because we have two really great interviews that we're going to be dropping. And one of the lessons that I learned last year was that there were a lot of folks who were lonely on Christmas Eve. And one of the things that I love about this show is I know that there are a few folks who get lonely on Christmas Eve. And so we're going to put up a couple of very special episodes, one on Christmas Eve, one on New Year's Eve. Our Christmas Eve episode is a year in review. We're taking a look at the 5 biggest stories, themes. I'm going to say themes of the year, using one of my favorite guests. He very generously agreed to come on the show and do a year in review and sort of a post-mortem on the political year. That was 2024, but also a pre-mortem, what he's going to be looking out for in the new year. So very, very excited to be presenting that conversation to our patrons tomorrow. And to everybody else, it will be going live on New Year's Eve. That is a conversation with none other than the incomparable Dr. Dwayne Bratt. And it's a fun one. He lets me be very, very clownish, and he is very smart, so it's not hard to look clownish. The other that I'm very excited about is, and this is, I actually really enjoyed this conversation a whole lot. I always do. She's kind of the prognosticator of Alberta politics. Dr. Lisa Young has a Substack that's famous for the little, here's the pathways that things could go. And so we have a whole conversation about the future of politics and how progressives, in particular, need to maybe reevaluate how they're playing the game a little bit and what the goals are that they're playing the game for, the strategies, the tactics, because the reality is the right, the non-progressives, the regressives, I don't know what to call them, they're willing to engage in some unsavory tactics, let's say. I'm getting a little silly now because I know what I'm going to do next, and I'm so scared of it. But are there some things that progressives need to maybe think about doing? Are there some political brass knuckles that progressives need to be maybe picking up a little bit? Because it's very, very clear that there are elements on the political spectrum that are entirely comfortable using tactics and strategies that are profoundly effective, but they're being used to weaponize lies. And so the whole conversation that Dr. Young and I have is on the question, is there a way to weaponize the truth? It's a fun one. There's some high notes. There's some low notes. It's really good. That one's going to be on New Year's Eve, because if there are people who are in our chat, and I haven't looked at the chat tonight because I know that I can't, because I have to get through the show. But good, and there are people who maybe you can all get together on the chat on the things on New Year's and Christmas Eve, and I'm gonna pop in. So there's my story about that. Okay, here we go. This is hard. This is really hard for me. My wife has been texting me, and I've been glancing only at the words of the texts, because I know that if I look at the pictures she's sending me, I'm going to get not using words. And so I'm trying really, really hard to save that for the very, very end. Thank you all so much for allowing me this platform, for tuning in, for the folks in the chat. You guys are all so wonderful. The conversations are so sincere. It is good faith. I cannot express in words how much that means to me. I cannot express how valuable it is to me that we've carved out this little space where you can be sincere, and that is good. That means so much to me, and I think that it's so important. And to everybody who has supported the show to this point in time, to allow it to get where it has, I want to say a huge thank you. And I want to just say that y'all are the reason that I'm not afraid, because I believe in you. And you let me do silly things, and I love it. And so before I get completely ridiculous, I want to say a big thank you to everybody who's been watching this. I want to say a big thank you to everybody who's listening to if you're listening to the audio version after the fact. We've had the little ticker running in the bottom all night, the Save the Breakdown, ab.ca. If you are able to contribute to the Legal Defense Fund, I have no illusions. I am in for a very long fight, but I want to be absolutely clear. I'm up for it. And there were some conversations that we had. There were some conversations that we had before we started the show about how close we were going to get to our goal. The goal was to start enough of a legal fund that we would be able to get the extension that we need, and that I need, and to get the first line of defense started. And you guys haven't disappointed. So at the time of this recording, we're 84% of the way to the goal. And you've had to listen to me talk for like an hour and a half. So thank you so much, everybody, for your support. We're not going to stop fighting, and we're not going to go away. We're not going to stop talking. So thank you. And look for our conversation with Dr. Dwayne Bratt on Christmas Eve. I'm not going to use any more words other than thank you for helping me keep the conversation going.